It's Shift and Steer. It's episode 245. That's right. 245 of these we've laid down.
Man.
And today we brought in a guest. His name is Bud Brutsman. Now, we've known this guy for a while, but you have too. You just may or may not know it because he's the brains and the talent behind shows like Overhaulin and like Battle of the Builders and Baja, off-road adventures, all kinds of stuff. We're going to talk about it today. But before we do, I think Matt's going to tell us who's helping us bring this to you.
Yeah, our friends at Geico. Do you know that right now Geico is offering an extra 15% credit on car, motorcycle, and RV policies? That's 15% on top of the money Geico could be saving you already. So what are you waiting for? As nice as that sounds, it's probably not going to last forever. So this is what you got to do. You got to go to geico.com before October 7th to save an extra 15%. Go to geico.com. That's it. It's pretty easy.
Hey, man, let's get into this. So, as I said, Bud Brutsman. Now, Bud owns Brentwood Communications. And I know the first time I met Bud, it was when you were first starting out with Overhaulin. And
long time ago.
Rides.
Yeah, it was rides.
Oh, wow.
Rides.
Yeah.
And weren't you guys filming that over at Robbie Gordon's old building, or his building that he still has?
No, that was the second episode of Overhauling I did at Robbie Gordon's old building.
Okay.
Robbie's a friend of mine from the off-roading world, and we were doing this truck, and at the time, Overhauling, we didn't have a studio. We didn't have money for a studio. So my game was to go from shop to shop to shop. We went to like every shop. We did a couple out of Art Carr's old shop. We did if there was a big shop, we'd end up just going there.
How fun!
That's really cool. But But so much has happened. Overhaulin's become just this show that almost anybody who knows anything about cars refers to, and it's become a touchstone in the industry. And it's kind of like that thing of you just touched on it. When you didn't have any money and you didn't have a studio, everybody just thinks it was always big. But I think what's so interesting about that is that you really had to work, because you're a TV producer, you're an executive producer, you're a creator, and there's a lot of work to bring shows like that to the air and to make them happen. And I think what could be really interesting is tell our listeners who only see the finished product, what does it take on your end just to come up with a show and then see it through?
Oh, especially breaking new ground. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, we not only breaking new ground, we were really, there were probably, there's actually one person in the planet who thought we could do what we were going to do, right? And that's Chip. For some reason, he believed me, right? So I took the car build model and kind of put it into a television format, which is not a new television format. Okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this. We're going to steal a car, prank the guy, and then we're going to rebuild it from the ground up. In 7 days. And everybody, including Brad and Matt, my brother, I called my brother and like, here's what we're going to do. And like, no, there's no fucking way you're going to be able to do that. The paint takes 7 days. The guy down interior takes, because really technically everybody takes, 30, 60, 70 days. But
yeah,
if you kind of use the auspice of the magic of television, and if you had all the stuff there, right? And if magic of television is like, we'll build an upholstery shop, we'll order all the shit ahead of time, we'll have a paint booth with an accelerator with baking capability, that was the hardest thing. We were told, especially on our very first one, we didn't even have a heated booth. We did it at Lanzini's, at Mitch Lanzini's, and we didn't have a heated booth. We rolled it out in the sun, but we did put a hardener in the paint. And we were always afraid of the paint. We were pushing paint technology, and BASF at the time was our sponsors and Chip sponsor. And they're like, no, you can't do that. You got to let it dry for a week, and then we would literally pull it out of the booth and start color sanding and rubbing it.
Oh my gosh!
Every single time.
Lots of water.
Yeah, lots of water. 9,000 grit. So an interesting thing, Brad. So what happened was then I finally got Jim Holloway on my side, because Holloway was from Mothers. He was a very important part of it, and he started connecting with a lot of stuff. So we finally got a list. We figured out what car we're going to do, which I think is a 70 or 71 Chevelle. And then we figured out the part list we needed, right? And at the time, the network wanted me to make sure that as you guys know, networks started like, hey, I got to run all these part by list by them, and they got to go try to procure this stuff. At the time, Discovery was not. I mean, I did rides on the air for them, but they really didn't have any automotive connections at all. So I gave them this list. I don't know, it was like 40 vendors and 900, 800 parts and motors and paint and wheels and all this other stuff. And I waited for a couple months. Like, I kept calling, like, hey, do I have parts? Do you have connections? And they're out trying to make deals, right? They're not trying to get parts. They're out trying to make, $1 million deals. And then, by the way, we'll connect you with this stupid show that no one even knows about. So I think it was like, let's see, I'm trying to remember the timing of it. It was probably 3 weeks, which kind of started my craziness. About 3 weeks before the first episode, I was calling him to say, hey, SEMA's coming up next week. If you don't give me my stuff, I need to go to SEMA and start getting all the stuff. And this is a true story. So, and this is I'll tell you, Brad, you'll appreciate this because you remember these days also with Chip. So the network finally said, go ahead, go get all the parts you need, right? Just let us know who they are. Okay, no problem. So Chip and I went booth to booth. And by the way, this is the time where Chip wasn't mobbed, didn't have bodyguards, and 5,000 people weren't following him like rabid, crazy people. They got a couple people who knew him, Jay Mays and some design people, but he wasn't mobbed like he was. This is probably 2002, 2003. And we went booth to booth. I must have had 40 or 50 meetings with every single company who I've made acquaintance with over rides, and say, here's what I need. Here's what you need to do. I need to ship here. And I was very clear. You need to ship me this part, because I didn't really have a budget to buy it. So I had to get all the parts. And just about almost every meeting, I really don't have any negative stories. Almost every meeting I had, the parts showed up at our warehouse. And awesome. The good part about that is we use them the entire time. If you happen to believe this con artist at SEMA on the SEMA floor and shipped us parts for the first one, I love you. You're in. And so now you're just supplying parts for everything we did.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's great. I remember you guys worked your asses off, because I remember seeing Chip. I ran into him at an odd hour at like a Starbucks up the street, and he comes walking in and he goes, yeah, we're filming. I mean, he had bags under his eyes, and you guys.
He always has bags under his eyes.
You were burning the candle at both ends to get it done.
Well, you worked with Chip, but that's actually Chip's fault. That motherfucker. What he did is we had an agreement, right? We had an agreement that in order to do this one thing, like everybody, there's no way we could do a frame off, right? So we're not going to do a frame off. We're going to leave the frame on the chassis. And then that way we're not doing too much, right? And so I think one night I went to the hotel or something like that to sleep for a couple hours. I come back and the body's off of the body shop and the frame's getting powder coated. And I'm like, what? And the thing's in 10,000 pieces. Like, we had an agreement, dude. You said we were. So our first episode, the only disagreement we've ever had, and we have a bunch, but they're all based on him ripping shit apart and moving stuff. We got in a big fight at SEMA one time, and I'll tell you that story. But I came back and that car is in 10,000 pieces. And then he looked at me with weird little eyes and said, well, it's easier. Then they can work on the chassis and these guys can work on the body, and we'll marry them back together. It'd be much easier. I was like, it was thousands of hours of work. But Chip is the guy who kind of, in the military, you call it force multiplication. He's like 1,000 hours. If we work around the clock, it's like working for 3 months. And all I got to do is just figure out how to we had engineers from Ford. Kevin Bird was there. When Kevin Bird was an engineer, an engine dynamic engineer for Ford, he was on the build. His girlfriend, who he just met, she was on the build. It was insane. There's a wheel on the very first car. This is how dumb and punch drunk we were. There's a wheel on the very first car that I think it was cut at Alan Budnick's shop, and it's called the Foose 430. And because we cut it at 4:30 in the morning on the reveal day, like Chip finally drew it, And like we're all just like we're idiots. We're like, what do we call it? Call it the 430. That's how stupid we are. Like, call it the 430. Okay, sounds good.
Brilliant.
430. And we put it on the car and we delivered it. And yeah, it was that was the first episode, and we learned a lot. I mean, obviously the show evolved, but we definitely learned a lot.
That's what's cool about it though, because it really is. There's when you're on the production side, there's all those stories that never get told on the air. It's almost like we know it, nobody else does. It all went buttery smooth. But the thing is that is the true hot rod mentality. It's like, yeah, shit, we can get that stuff done. No big deal, And it's it happens one way or another. It's like you guys were doing a SEMA build every single episode.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it was pretty intense.
Yeah, we would do a thrash, and people know me that I'm super mouthy and super aggressive. So when people come up to me like, "Oh, there's no way you guys do that in 7 days," first thing I do is like, "Come out, asshole! You want to be on the build team?" I've done that to hundreds of people. I'm like, they're like, "Really? I can come out work on the show?" And by the way, they don't come back. They do it like one time. They stay up for like 6 or 7 days straight. We know who they are. So there's two things we always do. You all right there, dude? You can.
Bless you.
Hey,
Hey,
allergies.
put a mask on. Put a mask on.
I suffer from allergies. Apologies.
Yeah, that shit doesn't fly nowadays. That's not allergies.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. It's
You're
terrible.
an infected dude.
There.
But so we always had people come. Yeah, that is
There we go.
such an improvement. That's like a Knights Templar, whatever that Grand Wizard thing. No, so we always brought people out there, to a T. Is like, hey, I want to come out. So then we had and it's I'm really kind of unabashful about it, and I have been for a while. But we had two quick stories, and then I'll tell you a new thing I started to do. But we had guys. I had a guy come up to me, and you guys all know him. He's a good friend of mine, but a weird looking dude, right? He's older guy. He's got a white mohawk down his head, and he comes up to me, and I got this new product, and I think you guys should use it on the show. I'm like, oh, and this is at SEMA, our first build at SEMA, like 2005 or 2004. It was called the Gambler, and I looked and I go, so what is it? And he tells me, well, it's this Dynamat thing, and it's the easiest thing in the world. It's like, I said, okay, well, we'll use it on the show, but you have to put it in. So Scotty sat there for like 2.5 days and Dynamated the whole car by himself. He's in the trunk and he's just doing the stuff. So our game was always, because I have and John Hotchkiss, who's a very good friend of mine and a lovely supporter of ours. But I started to get super cocky. I know that sounds very strange to everybody, but yeah. So second time I go back to SEMA, I'm talking to people, and now people want to meet us because the show's a hit, right? And my biggest problem, and I'm just trying to cut time. I'm not really trying to bag on anybody at the time of the show. My biggest pet peeve in the world was bolt on. Oh, this is completely bolt on. You just pull the suspension off, you bolt it right on. I've never seen any fucking thing ever bolt on in my entire life.
Yeah.
So John Hotchkiss I think he was doing the Lance Armstrong build with us. And he got this new product, and it's going to launch, and it's for GTOs, completely bolt on. I'm like, great, that's going to be great because you're coming down and putting it on. And I remember very clearly, and it was like 120 degrees in Austin. We had some crazy shop with no air conditioning. And John Hotchkiss underneath the car with a hammer, just banging away. And I'm going, John, what are you doing down there? He's like, I'm just bolting this thing on.
Just bolt it on.
It never worked that way.
Yeah.
That's so true, though, man. Muscle cars have been hammered and welded and cut and wrecked, and nothing just bolts on,
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But so let's fast forward. It's a hit. Everybody knows Overhaulin. Like you said, Chip becomes this mega star of the hot rod world, and here we are today. Now you're back. Overhaulin went away on a hiatus, then it came back. Now it's back. What's changed? What's new? And what made it easier and what made it harder?
Well, there's a lot in that question. So, Overhaulin became this thing, right? That kind of transcends how do I say it? Kind of transcends network executives, right? So we've been canceled 5 times. Every time there's like, oh yeah, we've had enough of that. And then 2 years later, 3 years later, something happens, and we've been lucky enough to ride that ride. But after like a 5th or 6th time, like, hey, Overhaul was canceled, and then literally Discovery Channel decided to launch Velocity, and they kind of look around and they do an independent study, and I love these independent studies, and they always come back and it's like, you got to bring Overhaulin back. So we're back on for 3 more years. Now Velocity's established. It's really good. Speed Channel goes away. So Velocity gets all the migration of programming and advertisers. So Velocity is a hit. Then they decide to blow up Velocity, and now they're going to do this online thing called Motor Trim. They have this partnership. One more study. Sure enough, they call me and go, is there any way you could queue that back up? And it's like, oh no. The big difference, and I'll be completely honest with you. You know, we were asked to do a kind of a digital native, which is really just for the streaming platform, right? And I fought with them, and I'm like, I think that's a great idea, and we'll do it. And it's 22 minutes, no commercial breaks, produced it. The budget's a lot lower because there's a lot of post, and one of the ways that we ended up lowering the budget is we decided to do new cars, right? We made it an early decision that we were going to do new cars, right? Chip, and by all of us, but what the weird thing about what we do on Overhauling is 50 or 60% of the work is not really that glamorous, right? You're doing rust panels and rust repairs and doing floor pans. That's a ton amount of hours. It's a ton of money. It's a ton of stuff. It's very necessary to do. It's not that sexy. It's not fun, and never makes the cut, right? Never. So why are we doing that? So Chip's loves a pure design exercise, and also I wanted to challenge him on. It wasn't just a financial thing. I really wanted to challenge him and say, here's a new Mustang, here's a new Camaro. What would you do with a Raptor? What would you do with a modern Jeep? So it really pushed him to do some of those new stuff. Now, we got a hellacious amount of backlash from our core audience, right? On the linear side, and linear television is just the one, regular television. But we're really going after the streaming ones. We're going to be the younger guys, right? These guys are essentially tuners, right? They're not ripping the floors out of a 64 Impala. These guys are tuning 2013, 2014 Mustangs, where we were trying to appeal to the younger audience, and then getting the shit beat out of us by our core fans. So we ended up launching on the Motor Trim app, did really, really well. Then the fight and the premonition comes true. I'm like, hey guys, you're going to want this on the linear channel, and you're definitely going to want this on the international channel, because I know how big this show is internationally. I mean, I travel around the world. I travel a lot with Chip. I travel a lot with AJ and Chris. This show is massive internationally. I mean, Discovery Channel is great, but the global reach of Discovery Channel and their partners internationally, they all buy it. They all buy it, and it's like Australia and Latin America, and it's amazing how big the show is globally, because they get it for cheap, and people put it out there and people want to see it. So sure enough, I get the call once I start delivering the 22-minute or 30-minute, whatever it was, cuts for Overhauling digital. They all want the linear show, so we had to go back in, re-edit a bunch of stuff, and start re-delivering. So we launched that. Then and this got a subsequently, which I think I can tell you, because it goes out in 2 weeks. We were getting hammered because we were doing all new cars. So we decided to do an old car, right? For our last build, is our 12th build. I happened to get connected with someone who was very close to Shaquille O'Neal, and he just got a 64 Impala, which you'll see the episode. We ended up stealing the Impala. And then this is always my mistake too. And then Chip goes fucking bananas. Like, he went out of his fucking mind. And there was so many modifications, because Shaq is a 7-foot, 7-foot, 400-pound man. We got a Roadster Shop chassis, and we had to channel it out and lower the floorboard by 4 inches, slide the seat back by 7 inches, extend the column. There was all kinds of custom shit, and I'm going, oh,
giant foot pedals, right? You gotta have much more footwell space.
Holy no, we did. We special.
Seriously,
we did special. No, we did. We had the thing. His foot, literally, when you put his foot on the floor, it goes up to the middle of the gauge cluster. It was fucking massive. So like, how are we going to do this? So we cut the bottom of the dash, lowered the foot box by additional couple inches, and then spread the panels apart, the pedals apart, so we could get his foot in there, because it's the biggest thing you've ever seen. Like it's
I'm so glad you mentioned that, because on so many of these basketball guy builds, nobody ever talks about the footwell box, and I'm telling you, it's a big problem.
And
It is a big
Shaquille
problem.
is
Yeah.
truly, he's a giant, man. The guy's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
he is.
at Boyd's, we did a Wilt Chamberlain brought by an Austin Healey and said, I want to be able to drive this.
Did he carry it in? Was he carrying it when he was on it?
Like a baby.
I want to make this car.
Yeah, you know, it's like,
Can you make this bigger? I love these stories, Bud. These are awesome.
Yeah, they are. And man, we're gonna have to have you back just talking more about it. But we want to fit in before we run out of time.
I talk a lot of shit, by the way.
Wait, hold on a second. First of all, you said there was an argument with Chip at SEMA.
Oh,
you're not going to get around that. So let's just go ahead and get right to that.
Oh,
thank you, Matt.
No, here's the thing. Is it? Yeah, some people say I'm one of the only people who can control Chip, and that's not true at all. Chip and I definitely have an understanding, but there are some times because I'm responsible for a lot of stuff, a lot of crazy shit that Chip does. Right, when Chip's in the shop and he's got some rich guy paying for it, he can do whatever the fuck he wants. It's great. The problem is, like, there was a fight with Chip. We were doing a build in 2007, 2008 at SEMA. We had this really big spectacle. This won't take long. Really, really big spectacle. Because we had a tent and there's a couple thousand people and sponsors and tractor trailers.
Yeah, yeah.
Matt, you were there. You were
I
always
remember
there.
that. Yep.
And we were doing a 71 Challenger, right? So we kind of got wind that the Challenger was coming out whenever it came out, because we knew that was going to be popular, so we wanted to find one at that area, and we had to find one in Vegas. Found a really cool Challenger. There's two stories on that one, by the way. Yeah, that one. This is the second one's super crazy, and I've done it a couple times.
Bud Brutsman Part 2 coming soon.
Oh wait, no, you got to hear this one SEMA story, because it's fucking legendary. So anyhow, I come back from whatever. At that time, I'm having meetings, I'm doing sponsors. I come back and I look over at the car. Someone's talking to me, and my eyes drift off, and I see a fucking tape line on the car, and by the way, it's going this way. And I look at that and I'm like, oh no. I go, hey, shit, the fuck, what is that? And he's like, oh, I'm going to cut the car in half and extend it by 3 inches. And I'm like, the fuck you are? And I took the tape thing off and I pulled it. And he's on the other side putting the tape back on. I'm like, no. And then he goes, no, every time I look at this car, it's always too long. So I'm going to shorten it by 3 inches. Like, but then you guys know nothing will fit, right? No fenders will fit, no suspension will fit, and then it's
nothing
just
will bolt on.
Yeah, it's just a landslide of shit, right? And that's all there is.
Wait a minute.
You mean at SEMA, you're afraid of getting new window glass and drive shafts? And
yeah, and by the way, there's like 3 people on the entire planet, right? Like him and Stephen Hawking and some other fucking wacko. We're going to know that Chip moved that by 3/4 of an inch to me. It's like, oh, I like the way you moved that line. It was like him and I don't know. You name a couple designers. Anyhow, but they're the only. Yeah. They would look at it and go, oh, you moved that line by 3 inches. Oh, that looks great. I like how you stretch it out and make it lower the car. I get it, but not for SEMA. I mean, we're in a live audience. If it was at the shop.
Yeah.
If it was at the shop, it would be okay. We could have a late reveal. But the hardest thing about SEMA is Chris Kirsting would come up to me and he'd visit all the time. He's like, are we okay for a 4:30 reveal? I'm like, oh, yeah, we're great.
Sure.
I need to drive this out at the end of the show.
Yes. So last thing about that one, because there's a million of them. This actually happened. That guy, you can get a hold of the guy. So we needed, for that particular car, we needed a K member. And somebody, I don't know who it was, one of my massive derelicts on the build team, went way back in the new product thing. And there was this little like 5x5 booth with some curtains around it. A guy who cast a new K member. It was like a special K member that will bolt up some Pro Touring suspension on it. So somebody's like, oh, I saw that guy. We should get a hold of him. So we ended up, this is true. We took his prototype off his little pegboard, right? And put a note on it and say, hey, sorry, we need your part. Come visit us in Overhaulin. And we bolted it on the car, right? And now the guy shows up and he's got this note. He's on the bleachers. And I hear in the radio, I was like, hey, there's some pissed off guy here. And I look over here and he's holding a note. He's holding this little note. And I'm like, yeah, let him in. So we bring him this set. He's not happy. He's not happy at all, right? And I'm like, dude, listen, you can sit back there in your little new product thing and get your ass kicked, or you could sit here all day, work on the build, talk to Chip, and we'll endorse your thing and you'll sell more. Because I was like, I give him the whole speech, and he finally gave up. So he built this whole K member, traveled to SEMA to show his prototype, and we stole it from him. And put it on literally. Yeah. I mean, it all worked out, and I probably would have I'll pay you for it. It's like, it's not for sale. It's my only one. But we ended up keeping it, and it was on the car.
Oh, it's good. Hopefully it worked too, because the prototype, who knows? Half the shit that ends up at SEMA is held together with double stick tape and bubble gum and who knows what. So, by the way, when you were fighting with Chip on whether to cut the car or not, did you cut the car? Who won that argument?
No. Well, it wouldn't be a fight at that point. If he won, it's not a fight. It's only a fight if I win, right? No, I was like, there's no way. I mean, sometimes you gotta no, because Brad's right. Drive shaft and glass and nothing works and everything, because he's famous for that. He's famous for, and I've seen him do it 1,000 times. We've done it a couple times on the show where he just starts moving body lines around, and you're like, oh my God, I've been through that. At that point, I've been through like 30 or 40 builds, so I know what that feels like. Like live in front of SEMA, no, you can't section the car right then. No.
Here's a little inside joke for us television people. There's no magic in television, only theft.
I want to go back a little bit to Rides. Rides was one of the car shows that kind of caught my attention, and in my opinion, sort of started car shows on TV for me. It was just a very well done docu-series. And I can see a difficult show to do just in the fact that you're trying to document something that could take months, if not years, to do. And then how do you turn that into an episode? But I just want to say kudos on that show. I love it. It really was so much about the vehicle. It didn't focus on personalities and characters, which is a lot of what television is, but Rides to me was, you had a host, you had a narrator, and you just had whoever was working in the car at the time, people from Ford or whomever. But just a great show. Still one of my favorites.
Really, absolutely.
Yeah,
well, Rides was a Rides. Sorry, Brad. Well, we were lucky because Rides was the first full commission HD production that Discovery did. I sold this. John Hendricks and Andrew Hendricks wanted to build a turbo block on Tuesday night on TLC. So I pitched them this show called Rides. And for anybody to understand what it is, it's basically my version of 30 for 30, which is really amazing, well-told stories about athletes. And I wanted to bring that back then. I mean, this is 2002, so 18 years ago. I think that the cars deserve that. And we lucked into a bunch of amazing things. I mean, we were working with Carroll Shelby on the prototype Cobra. We launched the C6. We raced in Baja. We raced in Bonneville. We built a whole bunch of amazing cars with, you name it. Sometimes they're celebrities and sometimes they weren't. But the idea was really, as a car fan or a car guy, if you want to call it, I just wanted to go wherever I felt was cool. If it's something that's really cool, then let's do it. Jay Leno got involved. Jay Leno would call me. The show in the underground, this group here. There's one story about Rides. I get a call on Saturday morning, right? And I didn't know Jay that well, but Jay Leno calls me on Saturday morning and says, I found the lost Duesenberg, which is the very last remaining Model X Duesenberg, right? I know where it's at. It's in a garage in Burbank. I'm going to open it up for the first time in 70 years. Do you want to be there for a rides episode? Now, the process of getting an episode approved is you normally have to write it up, get it approved. It goes through some network stuff, right? So literally on Saturday, he calls me and says, Sunday, this is how Jay is, right? I'm going to go do this. If you want to be there, great, show up. So then I have one day to get a hold of network executives, convince them that Jay Leno found something special, which they don't know what the fuck is. What's a Model X? They don't even know what a Duesenberg is. And like, are you sure it's there? So I got to call Jay back. Like, Jay, are you sure it's there? It's like, I picked in the window. There's 2 cars in there. It's definitely the Model X. I know. I bought the whole. So he bought the. It was an estate sale. He bought the garage. He bought the garage and all its contents sight unseen. Right? He says, I'm not going to open it. I'm going to peek in the window and I'm going to pay you for the garage right now. So then he calls me. And then I get it pushed through. Technically, I don't think I got to push. Technically, knowing me, I probably just went and shot it and got approval on Monday.
Right.
But I'll say I got approval or whatever. So we show up on Sunday, and this is how underground the show was. Like, people kind of knew that we were doing this amazing storytelling. And it by the way, turned out perfect. Like we're there.
Yeah, I remember the episode.
Oh, it was right in Burbank. So literally, Jay Leno's one of the biggest Duesenberg collectors. He's got 12 or 13 of them. He's got a room called the Duesenberg Room, right? So, and him and Randy Ema and some other people in the Duesenberg world have been searching for the one remaining Model X. And it's literally 3 miles from his fucking shop.
Yeah.
In Burbank, somebody had it. And I'll end the story this, but we finally pull it out. It was parked there for 70 years. We finally pull it out. There's 2 things in it, 3 things that were just absolutely fascinating. So we open the trunk of the car, and there's a sailor uniform in it with a newspaper that it says Japs surrender, right, from World War II. And it was in the trunk of the car. So that's how old this thing is, Japs surrender. And then in the ashtray was an NBC matchbook, which he was working for NBC at the time. And it was just all this really cool kind of, signage. And we just pulled it out, jerked it out of there. Never restored it. He just did the brakes, went through the motor, cleaned it up, and it still sits in his collection now. And that's, every time I talk to Discovery Channel, which is probably weekly, they ask me what I'm working on, and I always bring up rides. I'm like, hey, how about doing rides? They're like, shut up, don't bring up rides. I'm like, but why? It's really, it's an anthology of amazing stories. Just like 30 for 30. And if we can tell it, I'm going to get that show back up and running sooner or later. I did 58 episodes. I could do 158.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah,
right on.
When you find stories like the one about Jay, that's a producer's dream. It's like, because that's a story in itself, and then you can just craft around it. It's so awesome.
Yeah. Well, if you find the good stories, you don't have to work that hard. They just tell themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Amazing.
It's nice when Jay finds a story for you and calls you up and says you have 12 hours to get over here and film it.
And it's so incredible.
Yeah.
Hey, Bud, you have about another 30 minutes. Can we grab you for another 30?
Sure.
Okay, so what we're going to do, guys, is we're going to split this show in half because we're going to end this one in a couple minutes, and then we'll come back with a part 2. And what we'll do is we'll redo it, guys. But so Matt, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I was gonna say what else are you working on? I thought we were running out of time, but I was gonna say what was sort of what's next. So why don't we do this? Why don't we queue up what's next now, and then we'll break for another episode. So what's the newest things coming from BCII, from your company?
Yeah, because that's always the nostalgic shit. So the Overhaulin, and those are stories. So the Overhaulin rides, that's episodes. We can do what's next on the next episode. Fine. I have a couple things. Like I said, the video game, a lot of stuff in Mexico. And we'll talk about it when we get to the next one. Sorry if I'm not a good guest. Tell me.
No, great.
This is great.
So coming up, everybody, you're going to want to watch episode 2 because we're going to talk about SEMA Battle of the Builders. We're going to talk about Baja off-roading, all this other stuff with the second part of Bud Brutsman from Brentwood Communications. And don't forget, Matt, where can they find us online?
You guys can check us out at shiftandsteer.com, and Shift Steer Media is pretty much all of our social media accounts. So you can find that stuff up there. You can follow me at Moderator.
And everyone,
I think this should be Shift and Steer cliffhangers. I think
exactly.
Yeah, right.
But don't forget, everybody, to give us a 5-star rating. You've been doing a great job of that and helping us out on iTunes. And remember, our entire catalog is available at shiftandsteer.com, as far as bonus content and photo galleries, everything. And you can find me at Bradley_Fanshaw on Instagram. Aaron, where can they find you, buddy?
Aaron Hagar online pretty much everywhere, and theRatRunnersGarage.com.
Perfect. Bud, do you want to mention a website people can find out more about your company?
Yeah, I have our Facebook is BCII Productions. Our website is BCI TV. You can catch me on LinkedIn under Bud Brutsman. We post regularly, really about our stuff and what we're doing.
Cool. All right, everybody. So part 2, we're going to have more stories. We're going to have more with Bud. So make sure you come back next week. Thanks.